So, you know, it's just remarkable to honor our veterans, and really, I am really pleased that you've seen fit to do that. And so what I did was I brought along tonight some recognition here, and this is a Minuteman, and the Minuteman is the symbol of that the National Guard uses. And that's okay. Yeah, and you know, because when we got started, long before the Army started and all of that, what happened was when there was a threat, the farmers picked up their rifles and went out, or their muskets really, and went out to defend their land. And so that's why the symbol is what it is. And so this is a Minuteman Award that I'd like to just present here tonight for this effort that's gone on. This is issued by this award is actually issued by the Adjutant General of Pennsylvania. General Pippy is the Adjutant General, and that title, for those who have served, might be a bit misleading. Adjutants are usually personnel people, but the Adjutant General of Pennsylvania is in charge of the Army National Guard, the Air National Guard, and the veterans for the whole state of Pennsylvania. And so General Weigel is the veterans deputy. And so I asked if they would actually recognize the society, which they have done. And I'm going to read a citation, if you will. It says, "The Greater Tri-Town Area Historical Society has spent considerable time, effort, and money in order to recognize the various military services and service members in its local area in southwestern Pennsylvania. This dedicated, humble group of proud Americans have worked diligently over the years to recognize military service and to honor those who wore the uniform. In November of 2024, the Society dedicated an entire room in its building to local servicemen and women. It includes historical memorabilia, a photographic wall of honor, and much more. The Society also plans and hosts local events for the public, again, to recognize service members. The Society team of local residents have made an extraordinary effort to recognize and remember all local service members, and this effort will undoubtedly continue in the years to come." So on behalf of the military, I would like to say thanks for what so many of you have done. I know some are here for the presentation tonight, but many of you are actual members of the society. So thank you for what you've done and what you're going to continue to do, I'm sure.
Thank
Okay?
you. Thank you.
So who can I give this to?
She's an officer.
Claudia's an officer.
Claudia's an officer, and Biff is an enlisted member. So.
That's right.
I'm a lackey. I'm a lackey.
Kim did a lot of the work.
He demolished it. I didn't do any
All
of
right,
that.
can I have both of you just come up here for a moment?
You.
Oh.
He's handing up an award. Go ahead.
Yeah, Nikki's the one who wouldn't let this go, and she couldn't be here tonight. So.
Come
Come
on,
on, Ben.
come on. Come on.
Oh, that's all right. No, you two. You're officers. So
So, here.
I'm behind you here. So
So because of the great dedication here of the society, let me present that to you and say thanks very much. We do appreciate it on behalf of all the service members and veterans here in the state of Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much.
I brought a light, but it doesn't work. This is going to be hard for anybody to see, but this is a map of a village. Two villages actually, a small village over here, and they overlap somewhat. And then we had a township road that went through the middle of this one. We worked on this for 16 years on weekends with Westmoreland Archaeological Society. We're a sub-member of the Society for Pennsylvania Archaeology. So I'd been studying anthropology, I was telling some people, and for probably 15 years I've been reading every anthropology book I could find. And then I found these guys, and they'd been there all along, about 5 miles down the road. But I've certainly made a lot of friends and a lot of people who have died even since this project started. I mean, there were so many of them. But I'll talk a little bit more about that. Well, the first thing we did, I was telling them, we were talking about groundhog holes. When they went out to this site, they started this year before I joined, so I got there at the end of that first season. They found a groundhog hole right here, and it had flint chips and some pottery bits up around where the groundhog kicked them out of the ground, so that's where they started. And it just so happened this was a charnel house, which was a huge, big house that they used for ceremonial purposes. And there were 4. That's in here someplace. I'll get down to that. I'm starting out of it, but there were about 4 adult burials in there and a couple younger people in there. As a matter of fact, the one girl, she was about 13 and had tuberculosis. We had a forensic anthropologist help us with the site, and she analyzed any burials we found, and all the burials are still out there. So we didn't keep any of them. Okay. The sites, when you do a site number, and anybody can do that, if you find a place that you want to register with the state, and it doesn't, they're not going to come in and take over your property or anything like that. What they'll do is if there's a road project or they're going to build something government thing, then they'll go in and take archaeologists in there and go through that before they allow the road to continue. And that's just to preserve areas. And our number here was it's called 36 WM 100. Now, the 36 stands for Pennsylvania, WM is Westmoreland County, and the 100 was the 100th site registered at that point in time. I don't know where I should look up, I was going to try to look up and find out what 01 was, but I didn't get around to doing that. Okay, there was 2 Monongahela villages here, this one, and then this smaller one. This one is about 200 years older than this one. And I have the dates here. Oh, the middle Monongahela, that's the bigger one. It was from about 1429 to 1489. And the other one was about 1220 to 1260. Now, the reason they didn't live here that long. They probably only lived here 15 to 20 years. Because by that time they would have burned every bit of wood off the property, and the ground would be overplanted because they would have planted it too long, and it wouldn't have been productive, and they would have hunted everything out. There probably wouldn't have been anything to eat. So they would just leave the village and move upstream or downstream. That's why, and they're called Monongahela because all these sites were found in the Monongahela drainage system along the Monongahela River, the York River, Castleman, everything that drains in the Monongahela has these sites along it, and they're right here. I mean, right up down the river, right here. I saw up on a hill, and I'm sure there's one up by the golf course up there. I know there's a couple across the river by the Nelson site, and there was some over Dickerson Run, and they're all pretty much the same kind of sites. And I'm having trouble seeing this because my light doesn't work. Okay, well, this site was discovered in 1960 when the owner, he planted tomatoes for a Heinz company. He grew tomatoes and sold them to Heinz for making ketchup. And then at that point in time, Carnegie Museum sent a fellow out to check it out, and he looked at the artifacts and decided it was a Monongahela village. And it's very real easy to tell because they usually have just a small triangle points, and then some of the stone tools and things and bone tools are typical of that, and you'll see the same stuff on any Monongahela village. You go up and down the thing. And he come up, and then we started this in 23 and 2000. And like I said, I didn't know about them until later that year. So I got there they were just closing the site up for the winter when I joined about earlier that week. So, and my daughter and I went out. We went to the meeting because we saw in the paper there was a talk on radiocarbon dating, and I wanted to know more about it. And the president at the time, she was a PhD, and she was giving a talk on radiocarbon dating. So we bought into the 50-50, bought a ticket for 50-50, and my daughter won it, so we joined it, right? And so that's how we got in there. And we got permission from the current owner. They had a hard time doing it because the Consol Coal Energy Company owned the property, and there's coal underneath it. And we kept they sent numerous letters to them, but could never get an answer. But one of the members at the time worked for Consol Coal, so he walked right in and stuck it on the president's desk. And that's how we got. And so and we just signed a lease every 5 years or so to let us come in and do that all the time. So that was nice. It didn't cost us anything to do it other than our time, effort, and money we put into buying supplies that we needed. And there was a lot of sweat spent. I mean, I used to be soaking wet, just covered in dirt every Saturday when I came home. And okay, that's about. Okay, just to give you some ideas. Let me put my glasses on. I can't see this. That's a little better. Okay, the bigger site here was 262 feet across. It's almost 3 football fields from over here to here, and then by 180 feet this direction, which is almost two football fields. And then the houses, all these circular things in here that you can see. And I know a lot of you aren't going to see this at all. You can come up and look at it later on. I'll leave it set up. All these circular patterns in here are houses. And the way we find these is we used a bobcat, because this had been plowed and corn had been planted on it for years. So what we'd do is bring a bobcat in, and we would scoop it off down about that deep, because that's where your plows would take it down to. That dirt's all churned up, so it's really of no use to us. We did screen a lot of that for artifacts, but to find out any information on the village, you can't find anything on it. So then we got it down to about that far above the part that had never been touched, and then we used hose, and we just scraped it back with hose to get it down to the clay level where it had been touched. And any place that there was a post put in the ground, it would fill back in with topsoil, so it would just leave a dark circle. So, and you can lay out all these patterns, all these houses, and everything else in there. And all the stockade lines, we had a double stockade line that went around here. All the roundhouses, well, before the stockade line, the roundhouses, there was 40 roundhouses in that thing, and their average was about 15 feet across. Some of them had hearths in, or fire pits, and some didn't. So we know that some of their houses are all kind of grouped together. So we figured those were family groups, and that people are all related that lived in those little groups, and they probably argued with everybody like everybody else does. And but some of the ones that didn't have hearths in, we figured they didn't stay the winter. They probably moved because you couldn't grow anything up there. Couldn't grow anything at that point, so they would have taken their family and maybe moved down toward the river and been closer to the water. They have a water source, and they probably could still fish through the winter. And then in the summertime, when it was growing season, then they would come back up here. And the other thing about wintertime, it wasn't as bad. See, with the stockade line, this was during the mini ice age. So everything was colder all over the world. That's what happened in Europe and with the plague and everything else. There was a lot of things that happened due to that. And so everything was stressed, and people would have been fighting or trying to steal your things, or taking your products or stuff you grew, coming in and taking it. So they put the stockade line up to protect themselves from neighbors. And so when the wintertime, when people aren't traveling around or out hunting parties, they could live away from the stockade and be fairly safe. Another thing that indicates that there were very few child burials, like little kids. So we figured a lot of them may have passed away during the wintertime when we were buried away from the site. So we found very little. A couple. I did one that was only about that long, but it didn't have the head because a groundhog hole went down around, and where the skull would have been, that was where it was. But yeah, it was about this long. So that was pretty close to a newborn, very, very young. And Oh, the charnel house I said, which was a bigger house, it was about 27 or 29 feet. 27 feet in diameter.
Was that round too?
Yeah.
That was their ceremonial place, basically? Or?
Yeah. Well, I don't have any reason to believe it was, well, they were round, yes, this way. Whether it was a domed, like wigwam type of building, we don't know that for a fact. But typically when they did the other kinds where they put a sloped roof on, the post would lean out. And we do check all these post holes to see which way they're leaning. So, and most of the post holes lean in. So that tells us that they put a pole in here and they bend it over, or they probably bent them over and then lashed them in the top. And they would have left a little opening in the top for the smoke to go out if it had a hearth in it.
Like those drawings they have for the Monongahela.
Yeah.
I thought I just wanted to ask you about the bigger one.
Yeah, I believe that it was, like I said, I didn't do any excavation on that part. I joined when we started out here and went around. But I believe that it was a wigwam type thing. It was just bigger. And the burials, that's the only one that had burials right inside it. And we believe that happened at the time, and they probably were bigwigs in the tribe, and maybe chieftains, and maybe that girl was maybe a daughter of maybe she was a princess of some sort. I don't know what they called them, and none of us will ever know. But the early Mon village, no, it's much smaller. You can see it's hard to see here, but it was a 115 feet across by 98 feet. It was almost round, almost perfectly round, and it had 12 houses, and they were smaller houses, and they were about 14 feet across, and I said 1020 to 1260 was the dates on that. The problem with that is when you do a carbon 14 dating, when you get the number back, it'll say 1470 plus or minus 50 years because that's just their accuracy. So we have to use that whole thing in there to do it, even though they probably only lived here 10 to 15 or 20 years at the most. And then they moved on up, and somebody else may have moved in after the fact, but they had a lot of room to move down here because, like I said, they would pack up, maybe move 20, 30 miles upstream, build another site, and then live there until they ran out of resources and just moved on again and did the same thing. So I watched grad students doing presentations at the state meeting, and they had a thing with all these different Monongahela villages, and they had all these lines going back and forth. We'll say this looks the same as that, and this looks the same as that. So these people were connected, and those people were connected. Well, the fact is, being connected, they were probably the same people. You know, the reason everything looked exactly the same is because the same people moved up there and rebuilt the village and did the same thing. So, and we don't know how many were actually occupied at the same time. Because when you're going to go 100 years here, that could have been 5 different villages or 6 villages of the same people, and it would all come up with those same kind of time things. Oh, now I said about the ones with the hearths. So some of the people here stayed year round, and that's why the hearths were inside the houses. So there were a few houses that had hearths in them. I think I had a number on that, but no, I'm not sure. No, I don't have that in here. Another thing, and this wasn't just all Monongahela. There were other things in here because we found these stone-lined pits, and they were about, maybe from here to the wall, this way in kind of an oval pit, and all stone-lined with river stone. And we believe what they were, and they dated what we got a charcoal. There was a lot of charcoal in them, so we could date that pretty good. And we believe what they did were roasting pits, where they probably built a fire inside these things and got the stones extremely hot, then put vegetables or root type things in there, and then covered the whole thing with probably with some sort of leaves and then dirt on top of it, so they would just sit in there and steam. And we figured it was a ceremonial thing, but they were dating back at 4,000 or 5,000 years before BC. So they were there a long time. Let me pull up this one picture. Oh, this was one feature I worked on. It is called a keyhole structure, and it's kind of an oval shape, and then it's kind of, since the picture was taken there, this thing looks bigger than it is compared to that. But it was a round structure, and it had a tunnel in it, and then like a hole at the end. So what that was like a sweat lodge. And so whoever went inside there, they would sit in there maybe, who knows, maybe for a couple of days. And then they'd have somebody attended to them, and they would bring hot rocks and pass them back in there. And they put them in this corner right here because the clay was red there. So I know that's where the hot rocks were. And then they would put water on them and just make steam. And this was all covered. And then when the rocks would get cold, they'd take the rocks and throw them out there, and then this was to catch the rocks. Then whoever was tending, they could take them, put them back in the fire, and heat them up and bring them back again. Continue to do that. Now, when I was done with this, I saw that their stockade lines were coming out this way. There was about 6 stockade lines that were put in there and had been used in the past, but they weren't part of the stockade. It was the bigger stockade. And I have a picture of that someplace too, and I haven't found it. But one of the stockade lines I saw come up to the edge of here and then continue on this side. So I knew it went right through the middle of that. So this was built after the fact. So I scraped that center part down, and I of course found those stockade posts in there. And I also found a bifurcate point, what we call a LaCroix point, which is a small point has the 2 bifurcate being the two things on the back. And you're looking at right around 10,000 years old at that point in time. So that's much older than the 1400s. So that was there before. So we know the people occupied or went up to this area at least at times and spent time there all those years. There might have been some paleo. I don't think we found any paleo pieces there. So let's see what else I have. I marked a couple things off. Oh, this is a burial. There was a slab. So what they would do is they'd dig a hole and put the burial right up against the side of it, and then put stones in on an angle to kind of cover them. And then they'd well, I don't. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't think anybody would be able to tell what it was there.
Did they put a flat stone on top of it?
Some of them have flat stones on top. Some were on the angles like this.
Okay.
And there were about 4 or 5 different ways they did it. Yeah. But that was just one like that. So when you get down under here, then the burial would actually be down underneath the rocks, the person. And we had one, and I was sitting out there the day with our forensics anthropologist, and she was taking them out, and but she did a talk on that for our Christmas dinner. That's what I had her talk on that for the Christmas dinner, and this person had been killed. You can tell that he was in a fetal position because he must have been laying on the ground and had his legs crossed like this. Well, legs crossed, but anyway, he had a cut here and a cut here, so somebody hit him with an axe, like right across here where his legs were pulled back. And he also had been shot right in the back here with an arrow, and the arrow went down through because she saw where it hit the bones as it went past and ended up down in the middle of his chest. So that's what killed him. And so they weren't really real friendly with each other all the time. And,
When they buried them, did they bury them kind of laying flat, or were their legs kind of pulled in, or?
we found one that was laid out flat, and one looked like it was the burial where it was buried. It almost looked like a bathtub, like it was long, and it was down, and it wasn't real deep. It was maybe that deep, but it was like a bathtub. And then other ones were like, they mostly put them in a fetal position because they would have had to dig less of a hole. And I guess
Where did you say this is at? Where was all this at?
Oh, this was downstream on the same river here.
Oh, okay.
And up above, where Sutersville is, downstream from West Newton?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's right up above, right up in there.
Okay.
There's a Chandler Sportsman's Club down in there, and it was right up above Chandler Sportsman. Matter of fact, they used to stalk pheasants. And the day I said I was sitting out there with the anthropologist, there were pheasants walking, or ringnecks walking across by us. And yeah, so a couple of people have been hit by BBs out there, and I was laughing. I said, "No, now you can say you've been shot because we'd have them bounce off of us every once in a while." Now this was something unusual. Now, I wasn't there when they did this. I don't know who did that feature, but it's completely covered in the bottom with clam shells or mussel shells, and I don't know that we even everybody figured out what that was for. So, but they had some reason for doing it.
That's a fascinating fact that we had a lot of clams in the rivers.
Oh, there's still a lot of them, Rennie.
Oh, they're still there. I went up and because I wanted to do some experiments with shells. So in the Allegheny River, where we fish, I went around and just picked up the clam shells along the creek or along the river. And one thing that I found out about, or I learned from doing that, is I was getting these clam shells. They'd all be in piles in an area, or just washed down, usually up from under a root area in a tree. Well, I believe that the muskrats were getting the shells, taking them back under that root, and they were eating the meat out of the clam shells and just dropping them right there.
We still do have
Yeah.
clams in our, that's really nice.
Until I was reading about them, I found out that they would eat shellfish, and then I realized that that's where I was getting these things. And same thing, all pictures of artifacts, but most of these artifacts that are in these pictures are on that wall up there. They're essentially the same kind of thing. Okay, I guess that's about it for now. If anybody has any questions, you can ask me or ask me later.
Biff, you said that one was large and the other one was small. Was the smaller one also, did it have a stockade around it?
It had a single stockade, which I thought was unusual because we call that a drew phase. And normally, those drews don't have the stockade. So, and the typical reason for the stockades would be to keep other people out, mostly. I mean, they're not going to worry about it. Somebody said, well, keep animals out. And I said, no. If an animal came through here, it was going to be next dinner. So that did have a single stockade on it. That's how I found it, because I was working on a feature right over here. And it was right where we had the bobcat went through. And I dug back.
50-50, and that's how you actually got into this?
Oh, my daughter won a 50-50, and I made her pay for it. So we got a family membership. And
you guys still do this?
I haven't. Well, most of us are too old to really spend any time on a site, but but at least now we go around to talk to people around. We were just up at Indiana University about a month ago, and we set up there for their things. And
are there still younger people working at the site?
Well, we don't have any digs going on right now. Well, they are still doing a dig, and I was up there one time, but they're doing some rock shelters up in Dairy Ridge, up above Dairy, up in that area up in there. And they finished one, or doing another one. They're working there in the summertime, but like I said, some of the people are older than me, and I'm 75, so and none of us are that great at doing anything. I have a hard time driving places anymore. So, but yeah, at least I got some enjoyment out of this.
Yeah, that's good.
How old were you when you started this?
Oh, when I actually started in anthropology, and about 35.
Really?
That's when I went out and found my first points. Actually, I have one point at home that I found when I was 16 or 17. My dad and my uncle had a guest and terror service in Scottsdale. And I started going out on the road doing tractor tires. And I went out and I pulled a point out of a tractor tire. That's what caused it to go flat. And it's in my one thing. Yeah. So yeah, you can find them anywhere. This is Pennsylvania Archaeologist. Remember, you get 2 copies of this every year, and you can order these yourself. But and there's everything in here from students doing graduate papers to archaeologists who have been working in this for years, and they'll get things. And our report. This is our final report here from the site. It was just in there this past year in one of the articles. Now I have one just using. Some of you might have heard the story before. Just a fact. We were at the site one day, and I was out talking to. He was from Carnegie Museum, and he's considered basically expert on the Monongahela villages. He'd done many of them, and Dick George, and he died. He died before we finished up out there, but. He had respiratory problems, and we think that maybe that came from when he was working in caves in Kentucky, doing excavations and having them mold. That's a very possible thing. But he and I were out there talking, and we were talking about what happened to these people, where they went after the fact. Because it got too cold with that many ice, it got too cold for them to stay. So they moved away from here. That's why in southwestern Pennsylvania, there were no Native Americans living here when European settlers came here. And they could tell that they had lived here, but there were people who hunted and fished in this area, but they moved through. They were most from Ohio, somewhere north of Iroquois, somewhere south, come up here and hunt, and then fight with them at times. But most of the people who were enlisted in the French and Indian War were really from Ohio area, out in that area. And you probably know more about this because you studied more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But anyway, he and I are talking about what happened to these people. He figured that these people came from around the Chesapeake Bay area and moved into this area, and just by like type artifacts or whatever. He had a name for them, and I don't remember what they were.
Okay.
So, but he figured they came up here from there back. Well, they would have come up before 1200 AD. And then we were talking about what happened to them. And I said, well, I read some papers several years ago, and I had bought a whole bunch of these magazines at a flea market up in Latrobe. And it was a whole bunch of years, like from the 70s and early 80s. And so I was telling him about it, and I said that somebody had theorized that these people, when they left here, followed the Ohio River Valley down and crossed the Mississippi and became part of the Sioux Nation, the Kansas, what they call the Kansas tribe, and became part of the Sioux Nation. And he's listening to me and telling me about it. So when I got home that Saturday, I went and got the books out, and I was looking for that, and I found that article, and the author was Richard George. That's the guy I was talking to. And that's the end.
It's a small world when it comes to
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm an amateur archaeologist. I started back in 1977. Me and my wife were working at a power plant. I went out one evening because the guy was in a thunderstorm looking in the field for something. I had no idea what it was. Well, I go down and ask him. He was looking for Indian artifacts. So I said, you mind if I go along and look? Yeah, but you're new, you won't find any. Well, I ended up finding 7 that night, and I was hooked. So I started looking, and they talk about the sites. I have 3 sites named after me in the state of Pennsylvania. None of them are for digging. They're all, I walk the rivers and hunt them. But I have all 3 of them are on 3 Mile Island. I worked there for 35 years. So 2 of them are erosion sites, and one of them was back in the mid-'80s. I was working one day, it was in February, and I found what I thought was a tortoise shell. I'm thinking maybe it was an Indian burial eroding out of the bank. So I'm starting to gather up pieces, and I go home, I get my wife's glue gun, I start putting it together, and I find eye sockets. So here was a human. So I was going to rebury it and not say anything to anybody, but then I started finding cut nails and buttons, and we found out it was a colonial man. Well, the museum came, and they got involved in it, so they were in the 3rd site that's partially my name, is for that body we reburied him. And it was interesting. I got to know a lot of the archaeologists, and I learned a lot. And they go through all my stuff and verify what I had, so become really good friends. But so I have like somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 artifacts probably. And I had the archeological group there last winter, and I had 2,000 on display. And Don Keffer, his rival's mine, but my stuff's a lot older than his, because where I was at in 3 Mile Island was like probably 8,000 to 6,000 years old, most of my stuff. Now they find stuff 12,000 years old, but Don has one that old out in his collection, but I didn't find any. But I want to go a little bit, just quickly. I used to give, I used to give this thing 30 or 40 years ago to like Cub Scouts and schools, and there was always young kids. So I'm still might be doing that, but anyways, not that you guys are that young. You're probably not as gullible either, but anyways, when I gave this lecture, it was now this was 30 years ago. Everybody believed that the first Native American in the United States and North America was 13,000 years ago, and it was a group called the Clovis clan. And I'll show you a little bit here. Hopefully everybody can see. this is Russia, Siberia, and this is Alaska. And, you know, this is kind of like California, whatever. Anyways, this is United States. So back during around 13,000 years old, it was in the Ice Age, and I don't know if everybody knows it, but there's only so much water in the world. In the earth, there's only so much. You know, they can't make more. So what happened was, when all the Ice Age came all through here, this all became ice. Well, that means there was less water. So the water all of a sudden became 400 feet lower. So the ocean was 400 foot lower in around 13,000 years ago. Well, what happened was, this is Siberia straight here between Russia, Siberia, and Alaska. And what happened when that water low, right now there's like little islands around here, but when that water got lower, all of a sudden there was a landmass that appeared here. They called it Beringia or something, some name. But anyways, the Clovis people from like 13,000 years ago, not only that happened, but when this popped up, there wasn't ice on it. So all these guys started chasing woolly mammoths and everything across this landmass, came down in here and started spreading out all over the United States. So that's like 13,000 years. That was the earliest we ever knew. Now all of a sudden, there's people down in Chile finding things 20,000 years old. Well, they never could figure out how these people could be here, and they were only around for like 300 or 400 years, how they could travel all the way from here, clear down to New Mexico, that's where the Clovis name came from. And these points were really beautiful points. They were kind of shaped, I won't do this justice, but they were kind of shaped like that, but they were beautiful carvings. I mean, they had this rib that goes up the middle, a flute, and that's how they would put it onto their spears, okay? And these artifacts, they were beautiful, but they couldn't ever figure out how in 500 or 600 years could they get all the way, travel all this way, set up camps, hunt animals, build homes, move down through there and get from there to there in 600 years. And it was impossible. So all of a sudden they're thinking, well, geez, this water is 400 feet lower on the West Coast, 400 feet. So if you figure how you can wade how far out in the ocean and get up to your waist a lot of places, well, you figure 400 feet might be a mile out into the. So all this, all of a sudden, even though there was a little bit of ice here from the Ice Age, because the Ice Age didn't go all the way down, they figured that maybe, just maybe, they came up through here and they come down through here and just kind of walked and maybe canoed some. But all these campsites probably a half a mile out in the ocean, and how do you find them? And when you find them, what can you find? They're covered in sand. I mean, you lose a ring on the shore and you can't find it, so just figure that. So anyways, so now all of a sudden they just figured that either either that or they came from like where Australia and that is, and maybe there's these little islands marked around here, and maybe the water was lower and maybe they could canoe from one, just come across and get down, but they're clear down in Chile, which is, far down in South America. So, that's the gist of how, 30, 40 years ago, this was it. They taught you that was it. There was one way they got here, and that was through this land, they called it a land bridge, and that's how they got here. And then, but people, the smart guys, they were thinking, it can't be. So, and anyways, me and my wife, last year, we went to Meadowcroft. Am I saying that right, Lucy?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was one of the first places. That was like 50 years ago. They started digging lower and they were finding stuff 15, 16,000 years old. So they knew, hey, it had to be sooner than 12,000. We got people all the way over here in Pennsylvania. I don't do this justice, but all the way over here in Pennsylvania that's 1,000 years older. And we're finding artifacts there. So, and I'll tell you, if you ever want to go someplace, it's really, really interesting. They have a nice exhibit. They built a new museum, which we haven't seen yet, but they just built it last summer. But and they have a colonial home there too.
Where's this at?
It's if
Washington County?
yeah, if you go like you're going to Weirton, go straight out 70 and you'll see signs. Look it up, Meadowcroft. Yeah, it's really nice. It's a nice little walk, and they
For a different project.
it's a great thing, But
I think they're about 18,000 and a half years.
yeah, they keep going lower and lower, and they just keep finding more and more and more. But anyway, so just a brief history of the artifacts. I won't take up a whole lot of time, but you always think that because something's newer, they learned how to make it better. But actually, the ones that are like 12,000 years to 10,000 years old, they're called a paleo, and now 30,000 to 10,000 years ago or whatever. They were beautiful points. I mean, they were beautiful, and they were long, and like I said, they had a flute in here so they could, put their spear on there, but they were the most beautiful points you can find by far. And everybody asked me, well, why was that? I said, well, the difference between that is these guys were trying to kill, saber-toothed tigers, woolly mammoths, all those guys, where the guys later were trying to kill a deer or, because all the big animals died off around 10,000 years ago or so. So then the next group came, it's called the archaic, and that runs from about 10,000 to 3,000. And it's debatable what that is too, but they're arrowheads. Most of them were just points like this. Most of them are like that. And they also made some darts they put on this spear they called an atlatl, and that's a big, that's another whole topic but they were little spears. And, they really don't make an arrowhead till probably 1,500 years ago, maybe 2,000. And the arrowheads are this triangle. That's all they are. Because these spears I have arrowheads that big. That size. And if you put that on the end of an arrow, it would go 10 feet and hit the ground because it's too heavy. So after they've invented the bow and arrow, or they got it, they started making these, they call them triangles or bird points or whatever. And so they went from just something that big to, these paleo points, some of them. And the difference between run up and jamming a spear into a woolly mammoth and, shooting a deer at, 50 yards that's why you make them so nice. So, I don't know, I won't get into much more unless anybody has any questions, but I don't want to take up a lot of your time. But if somebody wants to go over and look at Don Kepler's stuff, I could go through some of that with you. He was a family member of my wife's. Him and I spent a lot of time together, so. But I'd be happy to, I can show you one of the old points. He has one over there, but it's not a real big one. He didn't kill no woolly mammoth with this. He probably, I don't know. Unless you have any questions, I'll be quick to answer. I won't take a lot of your time up, but.
Tell him more about Don Kepler because it's very fascinating. I knew about him when I was a kid, and he lived down by the river road.
Yeah,
he had the totem pole.
Yeah, he was a totem pole maker.
Yeah,
he started back in 1984 making these totem poles out of cedar poles, and I happened to have the first one he ever made at my property. Because him and I got a cedar pole, and him and I were going to make one. And he was in his mid-90s maybe, and I was on a goose hunt, and I came out on River Road down there, and he said, I'm not going to be able to do that pole with you. He said, tree knocked one over, a little cattywampus. He said, you can have it. So me and three of my buddies went down the next morning, and I got it. And, he wouldn't let me paint it, and it needs painted and fixed real bad, so he passed away, so. I didn't paint it while he was there. But
and he made the totem pole at York Park.
York Park, and he made one at the Brownfield.
Oh, here's a picture of him.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, that's a picture of Don. Yeah. Yeah, him and I were good buddies. When he was really sick, I would take a 3-pound coffee can of arrowheads and send them to him, broken ones. And I'd give them to him, but he wouldn't. He looked at them for 3 or 4 months, he'd give it back, and I'd send him a couple new ones.
Yeah, Rob and I went to school with his daughter.
Yeah, he made a lot of decoys, and that's a little story too. He made decoys. So I was telling his daughter one time, Susan, I said, I never did get a really good decoy of Don's. I got a small one. And she said, geez, I thought you had had one. So she said, well, next time I'm up, I'll bring you one. So she comes up, she had, 5, I think. She said, well, pick which one you want. And I said, geez, I'd like to have this one, but that's probably your favorite. She said, no, not necessarily. So I got it and I put it up on the riser on my steps going up. We have like a big, I cut a tree down, split it in half, and that's the riser for my steps. And I sat up there. She said, are you going to leave it there? And I said, till the day I die. And she said, well, take 3 more of these. So I have 4 of his decoys on each of my risers. But yeah, he was a good guy. He's got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was nice that he donated it.
And they dug a lot of stuff. And, I just walked the riverbanks and I'd love looking for them. You pick it up and, no one's touched that for 8,000 years and there it is in your hand. It's like, it just makes you feel how little you might be. I don't know.
I found a lot in the wash.
Yeah. Yeah, and everywhere I'd put them,
He forgot he had that one in his back
she'd pull
pocket.
down a crock or something and look and one would fall out. Not my really good ones. And I do have some really, really nice ones. I have a pendant made out of soapstone it was shipped all the way from Delaware. Somehow it got from Delaware to 3 Mile. And I have a big knife about this long. It was from Onondaga in New York that I found in the Susquehanna. And the Susquehanna, everybody thinks that tribe was, a couple hundred years it was around. That because 8,000 years ago they didn't. Who's calling them a tribe? They may have had a name, but all this stuff's so old. It's just.
The names. Most of Native Americans just called themselves man or some sort of that. What their word for man is what they call themselves.
And one thing like I said, I started looking a lot. So this was 2 years ago. Me and my son went out. We were going to go fishing one day, and we decided we were going to look for driftwood. He did, and I said, well, man, we might find an artifact. So we went out. This was like 2 hours, which I've looked for 2 hours and never found one. But we found, yeah. Now these are all.
Were you digging or just moving?
Just walking along, not just looking down. Now this one here, there was like this much of it sticking out. And I just saw it. I told my son, I said, oh man, I think I found a dandy. But these are all 8,000 years old here. They're mostly argillite. This is just a river cobble. It was made into a knife with a little pivot here to hold it. A little dink right there where he chipped it to hold on to it. But, that was a couple hours. Like I said, that's not typical of a couple hours, but it was just to show you that was just 2 years ago.
Pass that around.
Yeah. Huh?
Pass it around.
Oh, yeah. You can look at it. Well, then, yeah. I'll be around if somebody wants to talk. I don't want to drag it on for people like me to go to bed early.
I know.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry. Okay, everybody. I just wanted to close up the meeting with. I'm the ADHD Historian on Facebook. I have a really good Facebook page. I used to have I still have them. You can find all my old pages, but go to the ADHD Historian page on Facebook. I know some people don't go on Facebook, but if you know someone that is on Facebook, you should look at that page because for the next 3 days, I'll share all Native American history because it's my favorite subject. The interesting thing, that's what I wanted to tell you guys, I had a dream that I was a Native American. And it was the most realistic dream of my life. And I woke up and I wrote down the dream and I'm like, I've always liked Native Americans. I'm going to start researching the Native Americans that lived around here. But like he was saying, The first map I found, there was no Native Americans that lived in our area. I'm like, what? So that was the first map I found. So I'm like, wow. But so I went to the first book I dug up, and you guys, I'll post this on the page. It's called Indian Villages and Place Names in Pennsylvania. It's a reference book that you can find in all the libraries. You can't get it, but you can actually. They've remade this book a few times. So if you go on Amazon or wherever, just look it up on. You'll find it. It's a very good. It's the best reference book there is. So when I found this book, I found out about the Iroquois six. Well, there were five nations, and basically, like he was saying, they use this. So we're in the future from the people we were just talking. The Monongahela people are gone now. So Pennsylvania was basically. All the Iroquois were a very powerful nation. I could go on and on about the Iroquois because they're my favorite group of Native Americans. They even had the Beaver Wars. You guys ever hear about the Beaver Wars? I'll share that to the ADHD probably tonight, not tonight, tomorrow. But it's very fascinating. They were basically, I compared the Iroquois 5 nations, and then they became 6 nations, which is another long story. So I just got to do it real quick. But I compare them to the Roman Empire of this area because the Beaver Wars, they made hats out of beaver pelts. So that was the main way to make money, and they were the most powerful nation around, and they just went around and basically they were just unstoppable. They even went all the way out to the Illinois. They even fought those guys. So, like I said, if you just start researching the Beaver Wars and go like how my research took me all the way out west from just the early wars that the Iroquois fought, like he was talking about the Susquehanna, they were an Iroquois-speaking nation. The Lenape, who are the Delaware. At the time of the Iroquois were in power, what the Iroquois would do, they would move them into these areas, like he said, where the villages where the Monongahela used to live. The Delaware, the Shawnee, all the different tribes, they would all just be living here to fill in the space to basically you'll hear of Mingos. Mingos are basically Indians who spoke Iroquois. So, like I said, that's my favorite subject. So later on, there's a book I want you guys to see. This guy made this book to inspire writers to dig more about. So this is called Indians in Pennsylvania by Paul Wallace, and I'll share this. He does a really good book about the Indian past too. And I'll share that to the page. And so, like I said, I started out back in, I don't know when it was. I was working at Seven Springs as a chef when I had that dream. But when I became Mr. Mom to my children, I used to take the kids to the library, and that's when I started to really start digging up Native American history, and it hasn't stopped. So I started, when I was walking for the troops with the flag, I walked 10,000 miles for the veterans. And so I was thinking, I stumbled upon Facebook pages that did history. So I'm like, when I'm done, I'm going to start concentrating on history because that's what I wanted to do the whole time. But I had to do that project. I walked 10,000 miles in 7 years. But when I was done, I was almost done. I started my pages, so I've been doing it ever since. So when you go to Wikipedia, you look up a little town, and it doesn't even give any history at all. It says, oh, this town's unincorporated and blah, 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 and that's it. So my goal was to make, in our area, going in even into West Virginia, is to do history on each of those little towns. And so I'm continuing the research on the ADHD Historian, moving all my files to those pages. I mean, to this page, and I'm making all kinds of files. Every town doesn't have their own file now, but I have them in, I have the mountain towns in it. So it's very fascinating. So if you want to learn local history and native history, military history, I share it all. I call it the ADHD Historian because you never know what history is going to be there when you. so, but it's because I have all those pages and I'm moving all the files. And I was right because one of my pages is they terminated it already. It was the IUP Indiana County time capsule. It's gone. I think it's because I named it IUP. I think that's why. But anyway, so if you guys want to see some cool Native American books, I got all kinds of. Before you leave, these are just some of my favorite. These are actually the B team. My A team's down in Greene County. I forgot to bring them all. But so these are really amazing. Like I said, they're amazing people. You know, it was a war they fought until 18 whatever. I can't remember exactly last year. I think it was I can't remember which tribe it was. But it was, but it lasted a very long time. We fought them all the way, after the during the Civil War, we were fighting the Native Americans. So, very, very proud people and very beautiful people, and I just love studying all history. But I'm really touched by their history, and as you guys know, I even like. I do a lot of research about the people who were here before the Monongahela people. So I even did a whole thing on them, the Adena people. I did. If you look it up on he has a YouTube page where and you can find my talk on the Adena people and the mound builders. Very fascinated with I'm actually working with a group of people down in Moundsville, West Virginia. About it's a very sacred spot for the mound builders, and so was this place. So all this area was a very sacred. They loved this Monongahela River, and so that's all. And I know it's been. So these guys did a great job, and I just wanted to fill in the end just to let you guys know that you can, if you're interested in Native American history, I'm the guy to talk to. I can help you find out about all the tribes, but I always post it anyways, and you can find it. You can find all the files on my ADHD Historian. Just go to the file section and scroll through. You'll find like all the tribes, the Shawnee, the Cherokee. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.